Welcome, warriors. Today, I am blessed to speak with an amazingly sweet author friend who is taking time away from her new grandbaby to share hers and her daughter's traumatic yet hope filled story with us. Grab a tissue and hear the story of how Dineen walked through a childhood cancer diagnosis. Let's rock. Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. Dineen Miller is an Amazon best-selling and award-winning author who loves to write closed-door romantic comedy, where witty banter, sizzling chemistry, and unforgettable characters leave readers smiling long after the last page. In her search for additional outlets for her creativity, she's designed several coloring books under her own name and under Humanity Art. And she has crocheted too many Afghans to count. She's a dog mom to 2 furry rescues, wife to a punny guy who thinks she's unique, and mom to 2 amazing daughters. The latest addition to her many hats is becoming grandmother for the first time. But before Dineen shares her story with us, here is a review from Paulette, who is a former guest on the show. Author Paulette Wren writes, I've listened to some of your podcast episodes, and I am impressed with what you have to share. Heather, your voice sounds great, and you make suggestions to help all of us. Looking forward to talking to you. Author Paulette Wren. I love this review, Paulette. Thank you so much for your kind words and for sharing your story with us on episode 25. And if you haven't heard Paulette's story, it's a good one. So head over to episode 25, but only after this episode. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and star ratings help other people find the Warrior Words podcast, and it only takes a few minutes of your time. Also, if you know anybody who would enjoy the Warrior Words podcast, please share it with them, whether you share the whole show or a specific episode that may apply to their life. Every time you share expands our reach. And lastly, come and join us in the Warrior Words Facebook community. We will have inspirational stories and lessons learned and some beauty bombs. Go to facebook.com/groups/warrior words. When you request to join, a few questions will pop up. Just answer those. And then I look forward to getting to know you in there. Now, on to the show. Hi, everyone. As you heard in the intro, we are blessed to have Dineen Miller here with us today. Welcome to the Warrior Words podcast, Dineen. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm tickled pink to be here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And for you listeners out there, Dineen and I have known of each other for many, many years now. And I used to follow a blog that she used to participate in. And I've read several of her books. And it's just an honor to have you here on microphone and camera with us today, Dineen. So I'm tickled pink too.
Let's have a pink party.
Yes, there we go. Cue the balloons. For those watching on YouTube, right? All right. So I asked Dineen to come on because she has a different perspective. We've talked about some people who have lived with cancer and their cancer diagnoses, and we've talked to some people who have lost parents um, also due to cancer. But Dineen's perspective is a little bit different. So I'm not going to give it away, Denise. If Denise, excuse me, please. I'll cut that part out. That's why I went quiet. Okay. So I won't give it away. Dineen, if you would share with us your cancer perspective.
Well, when my daughter was 14, prior to that, actually, she had been diagnosed with severe depression. And that led us down a path of homeschooling her, trying to deal with, what was going on with her. It kind of surprised us that she was, struggling so much. And then she started showing some physical symptoms, severe headaches. At first, I thought it was just her uh, teeth grinding. She had a problem with that since she was a little kid. And I almost canceled the appointment to do an MRI to see if there was something else going on, because I thought for sure that must be it. I'm so glad I kept it.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
because that MRI revealed that she had a brain tumor.
mhm.
And not only that, that it was basically blocking the flow of cerebral fluid in her head from going into her spine. So um, they called that hydrocephalus. And in fact, that she had a tumor like she did and was causing hydrocephalus was something that they normally only saw in like infants to 2-year-olds. Highly unusual to see in a 14-year-old. So suddenly, when we got that diagnosis, the pieces began to fall in place. So the next step at that point, of course, was they had to figure out how to relieve the pressure because her symptoms were starting to get pretty severe. She was sleeping a lot of pain in her head. Um, she was starting to have some issues with her vision. So the first thing they did was to create a new pathway for the cerebral fluid in her brain to go to her spine, which was pretty revolutionary at the time. Uh, Again, we were just blessed to be in the right place, the right time. We were in California, an hour away from Lucille Packard, one of the forerunners in medicine for children. And they had on staff one of the best neurosurgeons, pediatric neurosurgeons in the world. So he was the one who created this pathway for her without using a stent, which was highly unusual.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Stents are something that, if she'd had that, she would have either had to have it removed or replaced every 5 years or so.
Mm.
So he created a new pathway for her cerebral fluid to flow into her spine and at the same time biopsy the tumor. And that's when we found out at that point that they considered it a grade 4 cancerous malignant
Wow.
tumor. So, which at the time we didn't fully understand, but
Hmm.
then um, found out through reading the materials they gave us
Yes.
that this was like one of the most aggressive forms, and recovery, was iffy.
Mm.
So that was our first exposure to realizing that there was something very serious going on in our teenage daughter.
Right. And yeah, you mentioned the reading material. That was the first thing that popped into my head is you walk in there, you have no idea really what you're dealing with, and they bombard you with with
Yes.
all of this stuff. And you get, we should have like honorary medical degrees after going.
Within the first 2 weeks, we had her file was like 2 inches thick. And I remember walking into yet another doctor's office for some other aspect of it. Packard had this intense structure where you were basically assigned to a full team. And that doctor, I can't even remember what we were seeing him about. He held up the folder and he said, I've never seen a folder get this thick in so short a time. And it was just mind-boggling how quickly things began to move at that point. Within that she that biopsy was done. Basically, she was diagnosed the end of September. They did the first biopsy on her October 8th. October 22nd, they did the full surgery to remove the tumor. And some interesting things happened in that time period that uh, were very frustrating, but wound up being like the best thing that could have happened in the end.
Isn't
So
it weird how sometimes that
it was, they, because they believed it was a grade 4 tumor, they said she would definitely need radiation and chemotherapy. So the next step in this process was they wanted to insert a heart catheter so that she could receive her chemo through that catheter. And so they were going to try and do it during the biopsy, and that didn't work out. Then they were trying to schedule it another time, and it just fell through the cracks, which was so weird because these people were on top of everything. And then they were going to try to do it during her major surgery, which meant required them to go through the back of her head. They had to cut through her skull. They had to remove the tumor, which was sitting near her pineal gland. And they were going to try and insert the catheter then if the procedure didn't run too long. Well, it ran to the max and they couldn't keep her under any longer. So they said they were just going to have to do it after the fact. So they had the tumor removed. They were able to resect the entire thing. It wasn't, we found out later that it wasn't fully attached to the brain, which was a miracle right there. Um, and then when they tested it, instead of it coming back a grade 3 or a grade 4, it came back a grade 3. And that was a whole different category. But they were surprised by that. They were, so they actually sent the tumor to a children's hospital in St. Louis to confirm their findings. And that hospital confirmed that it was grade 3, not grade 4, which meant had they put the catheter in her heart, they would have had to take it out because she didn't need chemo after all. She only needed radiation.
wow.
So I felt like at the time it was so frustrating to constantly try to get this procedure done.
Mhm.
Yet it felt like God was looking out for her and
Yeah.
keeping her from going through something that she didn't need. And really that's what it was.
Wow. I loved,
Yeah.
I don't like hearing the frustration, but the outcome
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
all three of those incidences and failures, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And then it turns out to be, as you said, the best thing that could have happened. Because
Yeah.
then,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Saved her from going through more than she needed to.
right. And so I was thinking that as you were beginning to tell that, we're talking about two of the three major things that we need to live: the brain, the heart, and the lungs.
Yes.
And here we're going, you're drilling through the skull to detach something from her brain that shouldn't be there. And then you're going to put a catheter in her heart.
Hmm.
And, that's two out of those three things. And I can't imagine how scary that must have been from your perspective, because you
Yeah.
probably knew a lot more medically than Leslie did.
It was an interesting process because the team, they were very careful not to ever say the word cancer. So at times, I could it seemed odd sometimes, at time I think it was a protective measure, but
Mhm.
wonder sometimes if maybe it wasn't, maybe they should have used it a little more,
Yeah.
um, or clued me in because when I actually used that word the first time with Leslie, she totally freaked out because she didn't at
Yeah.
that I didn't realize at that point that she hadn't grasped that it was cancerous. So that was an interesting moment to have with her.
Yeah.
um, but just once they did that surgery, the next challenge was would she be able to look up? The area of the brain that they were working in affects the vision, and that's also why she was starting to have some symptoms in her vision. Uh, One of the things that could have potentially happened is she wouldn't have been able to look up. So as soon as the next day they brought her out of, they removed the respiratory tube and all that. The surgeon, the very first thing he had her do, he got behind her and said, "Okay, can you look up toward me?" And she did it. And we were just
Wow.
like, first, that was like one of the first major hurdles to overcome, and she did it right away. So,
Oh, that's wonderful. So how are you doing during all of this, through all these failed attempts, these surgeries, and knowing that cancer word is there?
well, let me go back to the day that she was diagnosed because it stands so clearly in my head. Um, we got the diagnosis. I had gone with her to the doctor, just her and I. I didn't have my husband come with me because I really didn't think
Mhm.
it was anything significant. I think that's probably what most parents would say, that, they really had no idea something like that could happen to their child because
Right.
we don't. Um, so, but I do remember being very nervous and having this moment in the car. I had uh, the radio listening. My daughter and I like to listen to Christian music. We were listening to Casting Crowns, the song I lift my eyes up to the hills. Where does my help come from? And as that song was playing, I remember at the minute it started playing, I was actually looking at the California hills, just finding some peace at looking at them, because I always loved that about California, how
Yeah.
different times of the years the hills either look like suede because everything's so dry, or
Yeah. I
green
remember. Yeah.
velvet because the rains have come.
Mm.
And as I'm looking at these hills and then to hear these words, it was like a moment of comfort that came in. And then driving home and being kind of shell shocked about what we just found out. And my daughter wanted to stop at Walgreens because that was just something she loved to do. She loved to walk around Walgreens and putz around. And we would do that some days, when we finished school early or whatever. And I think for her, it was kind of this comforting thing that she knew, I want to do something normal. And we were just walking around Walgreens, and I had this thought of, I've heard stories where people would get bad news and then they would be just so angry to see people doing normal things, going about their normal lives as if, you know, what's happened to you doesn't matter, even though they have no clue
Right.
about what's
Right.
going on. But it's just this mental process of, this is horrible, why does the world still move on? But for me, in standing in Walgreens and just seeing people mill about and we were doing something normal, it was so comforting in that moment to just be in a slice of life that was normal. And I think because I knew it was going to get abnormal really fast and
Mhm.
really quick. And it did. I don't think, when you're in that place, there's really not a lot of time or room for thinking of yourself, because it's about your child and their life being in jeopardy, and that's all that matters, is moving on. And let's get this done, then we get ready and we deal with the next thing, and we keep moving forward and we keep moving forward, and we do one thing at a time. And that's all there's room for. So I really didn't, my time came later. And I did crash and burn at one point, way past the outcome of this. Um, but yeah, it's just, everything was about her and what did we need to do next.
I think that's what we moms do. We go into Wonder Woman mode, or something, and we just take care of our kids.
Yep.
Yeah. And we do put ourselves last. And but I
Hmm.
think in that case, That's a little different than saying you put yourself last because your kids have gym practice or baseball practice or something. I think there's a there's a different way of looking at it. We just go into this superhuman mode
Yeah,
and like you said, take each thing as it happens one day at a time and you just do it. You
right.
just do it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so she's had the surgery and she doesn't need the catheter and you said she didn't need chemo or radiation after that?
She needed radiation.
She
She
did.
did do, yeah, she
Okay.
had 7 weeks of radiation. She uh she had her very last, let's see, so that was in September and October that all of her surgeries all happened in October. This was in 2008. Um, and then after some recovery, we had a little bit of a scare in her recovery. They took her off the steroids a little too soon and her brain started to swell. So we had to make a beeline for the ER one night. That was a bit scary, very painful for her, obviously.
Mhm.
Thankfully, once they got that figured out, she was okay. She started the radiation treatments and she had her very last one on Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow.
So she finished it, and then I think it was February 4th. It blows my mind that I remember these dates so well when I can't even remember what I did yesterday. Um, so,
I can
so,
relate.
so we had, they did a follow-up MRI, and then we went in to get her results to see where she was at. And so that was just another one of those moments of what am I going to walk into? What are we going to find?
Mhm.
And I remember that day just being in the shower and just trying to my hold, try to control my thoughts from going down that path of the worst case scenario, because it's just such a waste of energy to do that.
Right?
But,
Yeah.
but it's, your child, it's hard not to do. And I just had a moment where I felt like I heard God say that this MRI will be proof of my healing. And I just was like, okay, I think I heard that. I want to think I heard that, you know.
Yes.
So, so that day we walked into the office, and one of the many techs that were part of this process, I think it was one of the physician assistants, she came in and she said her MRI looks great. It's clear. There's nothing growing back. And I said, oh, that's such relief. I'm so glad to hear that. And she looked at me and she said, let me clarify. When I say clear, there's not even any swelling. Usually we would see some swelling. She said, we're not even seeing that. She is completely clear. And we were just like, oh my gosh, whoa. It just really brought it home what potentially could have been. And yet here we were with like the best case scenario. She had no loss of vision, she had no loss of cognitive abilities, she had no return cancer, she didn't need chemo. Um, it didn't mean the recovery process after that was easy. We
Mhm.
did face some hurdles after that. When you're a 14-year-old, and you turn 15 in the process and you go through something like this, it has a huge impact on your life, how you perceive your life, how you perceive people your age. So it was quite a transition after that. So, but at that point, we had our girl. She was okay. She was going to be okay.
Wow. It's an amazing story. And you know, it's miraculous when you see when you hear what you thought of a grade four, maybe not so good chances to getting all the way to she's clear.
Hmm. Yeah.
And when you look at the two bookends, it's like, wow, that's amazing. It's incredible. And then you look at each step along the journey, and there were pluses and there were minuses, and it's a whole journey. And you know it reminds me of something actually that I heard today about how God doesn't work in straight lines.
Mhm.
And it's like you had these steps forward and these steps backwards and maybe steps to the left and to the right, and but you eventually made it to that wonderful, wonderful MRI report.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is awesome. So I do want to take a step back to something that you said, because a majority of the listeners of the podcast, I just got my Spotify Wrapped, and it said a majority of my listeners are women, and they are over the age of 40. And so that would mean that we have probably a lot of mothers that listen. And so if we could take a step back to something you said about crashing and burning later,
Mm.
afterwards, I think maybe that might help, like your experience might be able to help someone who may be dealing with this type of journey with their child, or just stresses and traumas in general as a parent. Can you speak
Right.
to that moment, how that happened and how you dealt with that?
Yeah. You know, it didn't really happen until several years later. Um, we walked through that with my daughter. We had a lot of angst before we found out what was wrong with her dealing with depression. And then the aftermath afterwards, we had our daughter, she was okay. But like I said, it really changed how she felt about herself, about her life. She didn't fit into a normal high school anymore. Um, we wound up moving her into a charter school that was predominantly kids who were, off the streets or dealing with difficult situations at home, teen pregnancies, that kind of thing. But she clicked with this setting because these are kids that saw life a hard life, and she could relate to that. She couldn't relate to her previous life where the biggest concern kids had was, does this boy have a crush on me? Am I going to get
Yeah,
to go out with hang out with my friends this weekend because I didn't do my homework and I got in trouble or whatever. None
right.
of that related. She didn't relate to any of that anymore. So it took a while for us to figure out, what she needed and how to move forward in that. Um, but I think, so walking through that, we tend to hear these stories that, that recovery and everything's hunky dory, but there is a process of recovery that I think we don't realize is as important as the the cure, going through the rescue or whatever the procedure is that saves our lives. We don't realize that there's more to walk through afterwards. So that took a toll. Um, and I'm the kind of person that, that there something needs to get done. I'm in there and I get it done. I'm not great at asking for help either. So
I
I will
can
take
relate to that one.
right. I will take
Yeah.
some responsibility for the fact that I wound up crashing and burning. Um, the problem of it is sometimes we don't know what we need. And that's what I think was a big part of it. Um, when people would say, what do you need? What can I do to help? I had no clue. I didn't know what to tell them. I remember right after we got the diagnosis going to church, and the pastor's wife asked me, what can I do for you? And I just looked at her and I couldn't even speak. And just my tears began to fall. And she just grabbed my hands and she said, I'm bringing you dinner tonight. And that was just such a gift, just so,
Yes.
I would say, for like anybody listening who has a friend or a loved one that's going through something, don't wait for them to tell you what they need. If you can insert yourself and bring things that you think they'll need, don't worry about whether they're going to get upset because more than likely they're going to just be grateful that you thought of something they'll need because they couldn't even think about it because you're so focused on the problem and dealing with that. You have no more mental bandwidth to deal with average things like getting to the store, making food, doing your laundry. All these things just, become very unimportant because you're so focused on what the crucial issue is and figuring that out, dealing with it, living, surviving it.
Mhm.
Um, so dealing with all that, the aftermath of helping her get back to normal, because, her whole head was shaved. So then it was, dealing with her self-image and um, relating to friends that wanted to be there and then ones that just didn't know how to be there anymore because it was such a major deal. Um, and then in the process, so I mean, there were not long, I'm trying to remember things that went on. There were other things that started happening. Job loss, I think, was one of them for a while. And then our oldest daughter, got married. so, so then, so it was like the beginning of 2014, everything caught up. And I crashed and burned in a big way. And it was a combination of my health just slammed to the ground. We thought it was related to thyroid. I wonder sometimes if I just went into adrenal failure or something like that, based on my symptoms. And it took probably at least a year or two to recover because I was just that first 6 to 9 months, I was just pretty much constant anxiety and anxiety attacks round the clock. It was not a pretty picture. So,
No, but I,
yeah,
I, you mentioned adrenal failure, and of course that goes back to that whole superhuman Wonder Woman syndrome, and you're
yeah,
running on adrenaline,
yeah,
and that's what you're running on, and I'd be willing to bet because I mean I've went through my own cancer journey, and I know myself that you go during the day and do everything that you have to do, and by the time you get into bed you crash.
mhm,
And sometimes you allow those feelings to wash over you, and other times you just can't because you just
mhm,
are so weary that you just fall asleep, or you can't do it.
yeah, yeah,
So, so thank you for sharing that experience with us, and I pray that it helps someone, like you said. Well, you mentioned asking for help in two different ways. One, you don't know how to ask for help because you don't know what you need. And then
mhm,
other people asking to help
mhm,
because they don't know what you need. They don't know
right,
exactly what to ask. And it's this, you don't have time to explain to them, look, I don't even know what I need because I
yeah,
don't know what's going on.
yeah,
And so I think that is good advice. Just bring them dinner,
yeah.
just do
Go
their
to the
laundry.
store. Yeah, do their laundry. Go to the store, grab some
Yeah.
basic groceries. Think in terms of what you might need if you were in a crisis and do that. And the thing of it is, so, maybe it's not exactly what they would have wanted, or it's not the exact groceries they would have bought or whatever, there's two aspects there is that you're providing help, but you're also letting that person know that you're there. They're not alone. That you care, you're present, knowing that there were people around us who cared, that were praying, that were involved, wanted to be there. Those little pockets were such huge comfort because they were great reminders that we weren't alone. And that's huge.
Yeah, it is that. Yeah, I remember feeling that way.
Yeah.
So, well, one thing I like to ask everyone is there any beauty, whether you saw it as you were going through it, or whether you can look back? Now, I know you mentioned the being saved from the heart catheter, and I think that's an absolutely beautiful moment. Um, but is there anything else that you can see that maybe came out of that very stressful and difficult time for both you and the rest of your family, including Leslie?
Uh, there were there were so many little moments. One of the things that taking Leslie, we had her treatments were 5 days a week, 7 days a week. That was a 45-minute drive each way to take her up to Lucille Packard because we lived in San Jose. So that was a lot. We had a lot of driving to do. Um, it was a lot for her to deal with, for both of us to deal with. So I remember wanting to, I don't know why I did this. It just seemed the natural thing to do to, on the way home from her treatments, to stop places and do things that were fun. Like if we saw a farmer's market, we would stop and look around. If it was we were at that holiday time of year too. So, we stopped at a pumpkin patch once to get a pumpkin, for the fall. Um, just doing little things like that that were normal during a very abnormal time just seemed to bring these moments of peace and comfort. It just it because it can be such a serious thing to go through. And I just felt like there needed to be these moments for her that she could still be the 14-year-old that she
Mhm.
was, that she could see more than, the inside of a hospital. Even when she was in the hospital in recovery, as she couldn't sleep, we would walk down to the cafeteria and get soft serve ice cream in the middle of the night. Just doing these little things brought us these moments of normalcy, uh, just contrasted the seriousness of the situation. It brought, laughter in, it brought light in and levity when it was so desperately needed. And then to hear my daughter, as an adult say, Mom, you made a horrible time fun.
Oh, wow.
That
That,
to me was my biggest reward right then. If
oh,
she
yeah.
could look back and see that it was fun despite what she had to go through, that she still had fun. I was like, I did my job. you
Yes, you
know
did.
I did
Yes, you
my job.
did.
So that I consider such a beautiful moment. um, there was a moment in the hospital when she was in recovery, before she went in for her big surgery. She said she wanted to see, um, she loved the movie Oliver and Company. She wanted to see Oliver and Company, and we knew the hospital had a video library. So I said, okay, I'll let them know that you want to watch Oliver and Company when you're when you're in your room recovery, because they had DVD players,
Mhm.
VCR, and TVs there for it was children's hospital. They were well equipped,
Yeah.
except they did not have this
Oh,
movie.
no.
So so I was like, okay, well, I can't buy it because at the time Disney was doing they would only allow a movie to
Oh,
be
their
available
vault
every,
thing.
yep, the
Yes.
Disney Vault, 7 years. I was like, okay, this wasn't the year for Oliver and Company. So I called a friend, and because I knew she had a lot of Disney DVDs, and she had it. I was like, great. And she said, I'll bring it up to the hospital. We're coming up to see Leslie. It's like, perfect. So that evening they walked in, and I got the DVD out, went to go put it in the player, and I couldn't get it to work. And I noticed that there was a VHS tape in the VHS machine. So I just popped it out. What do you think it was?
Oh, no. Was
It was
it?
Oliver and Company. The hospital had
Oh,
no idea
wow.
whose it was. Nobody knew whose it was. It was just there. So I'm like
Oh,
holding I turn around to my daughter and I'm holding the DVD disc that my friend brought, and I'm holding the VHS tape that I have no idea how it got there. And I'm looking at my daughter and tears are just streaming down my face.
oh,
And I show them to her
wow.
and I said, This was
Oh,
just here. And she looks at me, she goes, "Yep, Mom, God was looking out for me." So, she was just like,
yes.
she wasn't
Yes.
surprised. She just knew. It's like, okay,
Out of the
okay.
mouths of babes.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
And I think, our biggest joy is right now. She just had her first child. And that was her dream, was always, even back then, was to be a mom. That's the one thing she wanted more than anything, was to be a mom.
and now she
And
is.
and now she is. We weren't
Oh,
sure if that was going to be possible at one point. Um, and now she is. She has a beautiful 3-month-old baby boy that just lights up my life. And it's that happily ever after ending in my book. She's walked through fire, and
yes,
now she gets to be a mom.
she gets her dream.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me wipe the tear away. There have been a couple times during this conversation that I've gotten chills. So, yeah, it's just an absolutely wonderful, hard but beautiful story.
Yes.
And now she gets to be the mom, and
Mhm.
she gets to walk with her son. And
Yes.
um, oh, I'm just going back to being tickled pink again.
Yeah.
So,
Me too. Big time.
oh, well, I also want to ask a little bit about you because I know I mentioned in the very beginning that I've read some of your books, and I know you actually just recently released a new one. Do you have,
Mhm.
I see them behind you. Do you have a copy of the most recent one right behind you?
Oh, I do. I do. That's this one. Yeah.
The hockey one. And I have
Yeah.
been on Dineen's email list forever. And when she was learning about hockey and
Yes.
I've been to one hockey game in my entire life, and I almost got hit with the puck. There
Oh
was
no.
plexiglass right in front, and of
Thank
course,
goodness.
my date at the time says, "Well, they just put that up last year, just so you know." I was
Uh,
like, "Oh, good. I'm so glad. I didn't want to be hit."
right, right.
And I never went back.
Oh, oh yeah. Yeah,
So,
I love writing rom-coms now. And I'm always reading them, of course, because I just love them, and read a couple hockey rom-coms and was very intrigued. So I thought, I really want to find out what this is about, and could I actually write one? So I figured I can't write one unless I'm interested in the game. And so I started doing research, and then the next logical step was to watch a game. Did not expect to fall in love with hockey. Oh my gosh. I love this game so much. Got to go to my first game. Um, and writing this book was such a trip because I got to put all that hands-on research in the book. But I also got to, there's an aspect in the book that deals with the hero in the book, his estranged father, and it has to do with mental illness. And I think for me, it was an opportunity to write the reconciliation and renewal of family ties that I never got with my own father, who um, was mentally ill. That it was just a difficult situation. I'd hoped at some point that there would be a reconnect and renewal there, but unfortunately that never happened. So that was something as an author that I got to put a little bit of something in the story that was near and dear to my heart. That something that I wish could have been. But the hero in the story he got the resolution and the reconnection with his dad. So yeah.
I love how when we write, we can put a little bit of ourselves
Hmm.
into our characters, and then maybe perhaps like you said, make something happen that maybe should have been but wasn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I love that. I actually thank you for sharing that because I didn't know that part of the story. So
Oh yeah.
oh.
Yeah. I love the comedy, the romantic comedy aspect of it, but I like to have a little bit more there for the characters grappling with because, that's, I think, more relatable because we all grapple with life.
Yeah, yeah, we do. And and I did want to bring because I know it's in your bio, which we already heard, but um, you have a line of coloring books, and I love the name that you publish them under. And since we're an auditory, if you would spell the name of your coloring book line, I love it.
Okay. Well, it's humanity art, but it's a capital HUE, capital MANATE, like
Like the
the
manatee.
manatee, Florida
Yeah.
manatees. We have manatees here, but when you say it fast, it sounds like humanity.
Yes.
So it's humanity art.
and then
So
and then
it's got,
Hugh, of course, for the coloring, and I love that. And it's
yeah,
a line. It's a book line of books for adults. It's adult coloring books,
yes,
not designed for kids, but kids can color too.
yeah,
But
yes, yeah, yeah, definitely.
uh,
Especially the Christmas book coloring books, a little
yeah,
more kid oriented, but yeah,
yeah. But I've seen some of those, and they're gorgeous too. So I just
thank
wish I
you.
had time. I wish I had time to just sit and color. I think it would
Well,
help. It would help my brain.
I know it's very meditative. It is
Yeah,
very,
it
yeah,
is. So I did mention your email list, and I think if any of our listeners want to sign up for your email list, they get something that you've written in addition to your writing of the email list, the
yes, yes,
emails.
yes. If you sign up for my newsletter, which you can, if you go to my website, www.deneenmiller.com, it's right on the homepage. You can sign up. You will be You'll receive a welcome sequence. Part of that will be a link to download a free novella. That novella is called Brood to be Messy. It goes with the Messy Love on Mango Lane series. And it's a wonderful introduction to the fictitious town of Sarabella, which I created based on my own town where I live in Sarasota, Florida. So it's their, beachy settings. And then as part of my newsletter, you also will get access to my special VIP reader page that has lots of other freebies on there, other books and recipes and other things too.
I have one of those recipes sitting on my computer. Just have to actually make it now one of these days.
Yay.
So, all right. Well, as we wrap this up, do you have any, and you've given us some already, but do you have any last warrior words that you would like to share with anybody listening, anybody walking through a parenting storm or, child with cancer or any other disease, even that, because I think a lot of the feelings and emotions are the same. So,
Yeah,
anything last that you'd like to share?
I do. When I started my newsletter, I felt very moved to have a theme. And that theme for that newsletter is Moments Matter, Laughter Lingers. And in my welcome sequence, I share the story about what happened with my daughter and how it really taught me the importance of moments and how much they can matter and how medicinal and healing laughter is and how it lingers, that it uplifts and it lingers and it carries us and strengthens us. So I would say any time we're in a difficult situation or when we're in a crisis, um, be aware, try to tune into those moments, those pockets where you smile or when you share a memory or you laugh at something funny, whether you're watching something on TV or something your pet does or just anything like that that just brings that moment within your heart and your soul and your spirit and just lifts you up just a little bit because those are the moments that they accumulate and that's what carries us through. And they're so important. They're so very important.
Thank you very much. Yes, they absolutely are, and I love the laughter. Absolutely love being able to laugh and knowing how healing it can be.
Mm,
So,
so true.
yeah. So, Deneen, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story and your walk through this storm with your daughter, and then the beauty that came from it, especially being a new grandma.
Yes.
So, so
Yes.
thank you. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Heather.
Well, I knew some of Dineen and Leslie's story before recording today. Dineen shared some powerful moments that I hadn't heard before. The most striking was that on the day of Leslie's diagnosis, they were listening to Praise You in This Storm by Casting Crowns. They were driving through the hills of California, and the line, I lift my eyes unto the hills, where does my help come from, stood out. That moment connected to Dineen's thoughts in the shower on the day they were to receive the results of Leslie's MRI. She thought she heard God say that she would see the results of his healing power, which led me back to the moment of Leslie's first test out of surgery. Looking up, a test she passed with flying colors, a tapestry woven together by the master artist. When any kind of art is being created, whether it's a tapestry, painting, a novel, we see the parts, the individual pieces. It's not until the moments are put together at the end that we are able to see the whole result. Both Leslie and Dineen had to look up. Are you experiencing a moment right now where you don't know the outcome and maybe you're feeling apprehensive? Record this moment and any moments that follow so that you may be able to see how they all get woven together to create something beautiful. Something to think about this week. Oh, and one more super, super important thing. Dineen reminds us that when we are in crisis, we likely have no idea what we need. If you are able to help someone who is in crisis, please don't ask them to tell you what they need. Don't wait until they ask for something. Step in, order dinner, do the laundry, babysit any younger children, pick up groceries, mow the lawn. In hockey terms, go on offense and shoot the puck. How can you help someone this week without requiring them to tell you what they need? Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.